Hey guys, thank you for joining me and welcome to the Holy Shed on Ash Wednesday, of which more in just a moment. But first, I just need to thank you for the many encouraging messages that I've received about our break in Yorkshire last week, which of course led to the first Sunday that we've taken a break from the Holy Shed in almost 3 years. That's quite amazing, isn't it? Yorkshire's a very special place to us. We lived in North Yorkshire in the 1970s for 5 years. They then moved to Middlesbrough, which used to be a part of Yorkshire, before landing up in London in 1984. But for almost 30 years, we rented our infamous little cottage, which you've heard me speak about in the shed before. And you can see, I say little cottage, it's quite big, really, isn't it? It's actually got a history. The part on the left hand side is the oldest, about 400 years old, and then the second half was added at some later date, though still quite a long time ago. And you can see the setting is utterly glorious, isn't it? We loved that valley and that cottage, which we rented for a peppercorn rent over those years. I think latterly it rose to £400 a year. £400 a year. Of course, there wasn't a great market for a ramshackle cottage with no gas or electric, no connectivity, which is a mile from the nearest road. If you take that little track at the front of the cottage to the right, it's a mile to the nearest quite small road, and you pass through 5 gates and a lot of rocky track to get there. So, yeah, it was quite remote and we loved it to bits. And we had so many fun times there with our family, with our playmates. Um, but it was that cottage that took us regularly to Swaledale because it's on the end of Swaledale, which is where we had our little break last week. So, all very familiar territory. I could honestly write a book about our adventures at High Colesgarth, the name of the cottage there, and North Yorkshire in general. So, hope that we'll be back there before too long. So, one more thing I would like to just highlight before I get into today's stuff is I would like to send a holy shedload of love to Susan, a dedicated shedster in Dunedin in New Zealand who I have heard has had a stroke just recently over the past week or so. Susan, you may remember, wrote the Conversations in a Coffee Shop trilogy of books, which I have commented on and highly recommended in the shed as they've been published over the past couple of years. They really are a treasure, and you can find them, by the way, on Amazon. So, Susan, we are thinking about you, praying for a quick recovery, and sending you lots and lots of love at this time. Get well soon, my darling, because the world needs you, and we want you uh, up and well and back in the shed with us. So, anyway, yes, excuse me, it is Ash Wednesday, the start of 40 days of Lent, which is the time, of course, when Christians traditionally open themselves afresh to God's Spirit, not necessarily giving things up, which is how it's commonly seen, but rather, connecting with stuff that matters. Maybe looking after ourselves a bit better. That's how I like to see it. And that might involve giving some things up for a little while or learning a more moderate relationship with things. But essentially, we should say Lent is not, should never be seen as a season of self hatred, of self punishing, but rather a time to attend to ourselves, body, soul, and spirit, and to attend to things that matter in our life and in the world. The ashes, which on Ash Wednesday are applied to the foreheads of people in the form of a cross, those people who wish to have that. This is really a reminder that we're mortal, only human. We're not supposed to be perfect, not supposed to be infallible. And it's also a reminder that there is beauty in the ashes of mortality. And I have to say that Ash Wednesday, for me, it's always been one of my favourite days in the church calendar as a parish priest. It may sound weird and morbid, passing around the room making the mark of the cross in ash on each person's head and saying the words remember that you are dust. To dust you shall return. But in fact, it's not weird. It's not morbid. I see it actually as life affirming. Our dear friend Sarah Miles from San Francisco, she's someone who's always inclined to transcend the four walls of church. In her case, St. Gregory's of Nyssa in San Francisco, where she, for a long time, was a director of ministry. But her inclination is always to get through those walls and take church onto the streets. I got to know Sarah quite a long time ago now through reading her book Take This Bread, which I came across one desperate Saturday night whilst preparing a sermon for the following day. And I read a bit of it there online, and then I ordered it, and I instantly fell in love with this book and with its writer, who we didn't know at that time. But a year or so later, Pat and I were in St. Gregory's in San Francisco, inviting Sarah to come to this country and speak at Greenbelt, which she did. Take This Bread is an amazing book, guys. I mean, I heartily recommend it. What a great book to read through Lent. It's the story of her kind of conversion, if you like. I mean, she quotes herself as being a lesbian, atheist, left-wing journalist who covered revolutions around the world, but one day, out of sheer curiosity, entered this remarkably, interesting-looking church building just out of curiosity, but found herself standing around a round table where people were celebrating the Eucharist. And when someone, because it's all kind of very informal, and it's also a church which, like, our own church that I used to be the vicar of in North London, has what we call an open table policy that says this is the table of Jesus Christ where all are welcome and no one is turned away. So we offer bread and wine to every single person without exception. Away with all that exclusiveness that is commonly associated with the Eucharist. Their policy, like ours, was one of offering bread and wine to everyone. So when somebody came toward her with some bread in their hand, she put her hands out and placed it in her mouth. And she said it was a weird disconnect. She knew what it was, a piece of bread, but she also had this sense that God, who she didn't actually believe in, was also in her mouth. Anyway, it's a remarkable story, I can tell you. And gosh, what a remarkable woman Sarah is. Anyway, rather than treating ashing, placing the mark of the cross on people's head in ash, as a strange Christian ritual to be done in the privacy of your own church, Sarah sees it as an expression of the gospel. So on Ash Wednesday, instead of going out with kind of gospel messages and tracts, she went out with a few other people in black cassocks, around the busy, crowded center of the Mission District of San Francisco with little jars of ashes, entering, as she says, the dollar stores, the taquerias, backstreet bakeries, bars and car parks, offering to ash anyone and everyone that they met. In a more recent book that she's written, she describes this experience. But, let me just allow her to say a little bit about it, really, as she this is a little promo video for her book, but she's talking about taking ashing onto the streets. And it's amazing. Have a look at this.
Ash Wednesday in the Christian calendar is the beginning of the 40-day period of Lent, which comes before Easter. It's a period traditionally of preparation for Easter and preparation through fasting and repentance. In a lot of traditions, repentance is seen as just sort of feeling sorry or feeling bad or giving something up. But in practice, I see Ash Wednesday as beginning a period in which we become closer to God. We turn, we change, we turn towards other people, we turn towards God. We become more aware of our own mortality. And like that first communion that I took, that real bread and real wine, Ash Wednesday is about real bodies. Ash Wednesday is an incredibly mystical connection, a sacramental connection that has to do with my thumb and your forehead. My book, is not just about Ash Wednesday, but is about the mission, the neighborhood I've lived in San Francisco for 20 years, and the ordinary faith that people practice inside and outside of church.
You want ashes for Ash Wednesday? Chiquito. Recuerde que el polvo volverá. Amén.
Amen.
I think we like to imagine that religion is very neatly contained in buildings or contained in denominations. But my experience in the mission, living there with my neighbors and with strangers, is that people's experience of the divine flows all over. It's dirty, it's messed up, it's up and down, it's in the streets and the alleys. People practice their religion, they have their faith, and they change one another and are changed by God out in the streets. So I'm interested in writing about Ash Wednesday as a way to talk about my own experience over the last 2 decades of really being formed and shaped by the lived religion and the lived faith of all these different people knocking up against each other.
Thank you.
Isn't she amazing? I love Sarah, and her wife Martha too. Lovely, beautiful people. And the book that she is talking about is called City of God: Faith on the Streets. And I just pulled up a little bit of it whilst that film was running to read a little bit more that she says in that context. She says about that Ash Wednesday thing, I touched hundreds and hundreds of faces. A guy in a pickup truck at the lights, a girl on a tricycle, an elderly woman getting her hair done. McDonald's was crowded with teenagers and fry cooks and families buying cheap fast food, and people reached out to us. A woman unwrapped her baby, a week and a half old, and held him up. I crossed his forehead with ashes and took a deep breath and told the baby he was going to die. And then his mother, like every single person who leaned forward to receive ashes that day, said thank you. I mean, flip me. What an amazing thing. Now, obviously, ashes are something that we associate with cremations too. And I think there's a taboo about handling somebody's actual ashes, their remains, which I completely understand. But, in my life as a vicar, I've handled plenty of ashes. I've handled people when they were alive in their flesh and blood. I've handled people dead in terms of getting a handful of their ashes. I remember being with a guy called Pete. He was a lovely old Islington senior citizen. And I remembered being with him 9 months after I'd taken his wife Joan's funeral. And we were now at Islington cemetery to bury the remains of Joan in the ground. Well, we knelt together and we was kneeling there in front of a small hole in the ground. Do you want to say anything, Pete? I asked. And this lovely old man paused for a moment. He was not a man with a lot of words, and it wasn't a day to say a lot. And overwhelmed with emotion, he said, she was a good wife. Everything a man could ask for, really. I miss her. I mean, he cracked up at that point. It was the incredible economy of words that cracked me up. Not because of the words he said, but because of all that was jam packed into them and behind them. She was a good wife. Everything a man could ask for. I took a handful of ashes out of the box that they were in, held them with gratitude for a few moments, gratitude for a life, and then dropped them gently into the hole in front of us and asked him if he would like to do the same. And then, as I poured the rest into the hole, a sharp breeze arose, came from nowhere, and covered both of us with ash. And there we were, both on our knees, covered in ash, laughing and crying at the same time. Most importantly, You know, the ashes on Ash Wednesday remind us of the importance of living now, of getting to grips with life, of waking up from the lethargy of merely drifting through our days and actually experiencing what it is to be alive moment by moment. Today, dear friends, is the first day of the rest of my life, of your life. And, you know, whatever's gone before, whatever we've succeeded or failed in who we've wanted to be, it's never too late to start again now. George Eliot, the writer, said, "It's never too late to be what you might have been." Great words. Just live this moment for all it's worth. Um, you know, my dad always used to say, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. Well, I would like to say, look after the minutes in your life, and the years will look after themselves. I've shown this picture here of a rosella in the shed before. I think I have anyway. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's a God, what a beautiful picture this is. It was taken actually by an Australian photographer called Carolyn Hyde, and I contacted her a couple of years ago to ask if I could use the picture because I felt, heck, you know, she's a professional photographer. I should at least ask her permission. And she not only granted me permission, she sent back these words in an email. She says, because I told her what I wanted to use it for during Lent, and she said, I thought you may be interested in the backstory of the photo. We live in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, and we'd been going through a very prolonged bushfire event, which had burned out large swathes of the native vegetation that surrounds our house. After the fires had been extinguished and it was safe to venture back to one of our favourite walks near Govert's Leap, a very popular tourist attraction nearby, my husband Neil and I were talking about the resilience of our native plants and the birds and the animals that had survived the inferno. Suddenly, my husband saw the rosella sitting on a charred branch of Leptospermum. Is that right? I think it's a tea tree. So I quickly focused my camera on it before it flew away. Many people, she says, who've seen this photo have been moved by the imagery of resilience. And despite the devastation caused by the fires, life and beauty can persevere through the ashes. Wow. Just take a few moments of inspiration, guys, from this magnificent little bird and all the other flora and fauna of the Blue Mountains and other parts of the world. And maybe think about your own life, which sometimes may feel like it's in ashes, the ashes of loss, of whatever sort, of bereavement, of disappointment, fear of illness or aging, apprehension about the future, and just ponder the beauty that this little bird represents. Of course, this makes me think also of the people who've perished in the ashes of their own homes because of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and whole communities where, you know, many people may have survived. Some rather incredibly have been pulled out of the ashes to live again. But all of these people now live with the ashes of what once was, in fact, their homes. So let's, if you've got one handy, you can join me. Let's One of my one of my best Ash Wednesday experiences wasn't in church at all. Actually, it was in the afternoon of Ash Wednesday when I went to see a man who was a couple of days later going to travel to Switzerland to end his own pain-ridden life, a life of suffering for decades, which he now felt in his mid to late 70s he didn't really want to endure anymore. He'd lived a good life, you know. He'd had children. He'd had a couple of wives, and done lots of wonderful things. But he just decided this is it. I'd never met him before, and I have to say that I was full of apprehension when his son asked if I would go and visit him because I didn't know what I was going to find or how awkward I might feel in the knowledge of what was about to happen. Well, I really needn't have worried at all. He totally put me at ease. And, you know, for a couple of hours, we cried and laughed together. At times, he nodded off, you know, he just fell asleep mid sentence. And then he kind of woke up and he said, "Did I just go to sleep?" Which, of course, made us both laugh a whole lot more. But one time, as he was sleeping, I thought, oh my God, I'm actually watching as he dozes off here and there mini versions of what is going to happen to him in a couple of days' time as he falls asleep for good, as far as this was concerned. And I pondered how peaceful he looked as he slept. And he said to me at one point, "Let me ask you a question, Dave. What is the opposite to life?" So I said, "I sense that might be a trick question." "Oh no," he replied, no tricks here, Dave." He said, "There is no opposite to life. Life just carries on in a different form." Well, I've thought about that many times. I thought about it actually a few days later when his son texted me from Zurich to say that his dad had passed. And he said, "My dad died with his two sons either side, holding their hands with a big smile on his face." So, dear friends, no, I don't think for a moment that Ash Wednesday is morbid. It is a reminder of our fragility, of our mortality. But it's also joyful because it's a reminder that we're still alive. You know, we have breath, we have moments, opportunities to be, to give, to receive, to be grateful for all that we have and that we've experienced. We have opportunities to hug and kiss friends and loved ones. So let's use this Ash Wednesday, this whole period of Lent actually, as an opportunity to grasp the life that we have with two hands and live each moment for all it's worth, as if it were our last. Because life is precious. Your life, dear Shedster, is precious. And remember, as the lovely man who went to Switzerland told me, all things pass. Don't get too upset by sad things, he said. Don't get too attached to happy things. All things pass, but life goes on. It's better than going to church for me, I can tell you. Here's a prayer. God, who brings beauty from ashes, who shines with pure joy from snowdrops on cold days, who dances through grey skies in rainbow colours, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet. In the dust of disappointment, loss and despair, you scrawl visions of hope, saying that this is not the end. Even as we weep, this is not the end. This is a new beginning. Amen. Well, I'm not actually giving up alcohol for Lent. Well, not totally. I'll be having a sip in the shed or two, but whatever you're drinking, I invite you to pour yourself one now. And very, very simply, in the light of all that I've been saying, let's just have a toast to life. L'chaim. Well, guys, if you like what I'm doing here in the shed and you want to support us, the good news is you can do that by buying us a coffee or a whiskey. Just follow the link which is on the screen now to the coffee site. The link is also always at the top of the posts on the Holy Shed Facebook page. And a million thanks to all those of you who support us in this way and lots of other ways too. We really appreciate that a great deal. So, what is it? Well, tomorrow, actually, busy again this week. Tomorrow is a soul space, which is online. It is a Zoomed soul space on the subject, A World of Difference. Actually, it's a very big nod to the fact that we're just coming to the end of LGBTQ plus History Month. So we're thinking about that kind of difference, but lots of other sorts of differences too. It's about an hour of music videos, film clips, poems, me yakking on, images, all kinds of things. A lot of fun and I hope inspiring. So if you can join us, you don't even need to show your face on the screen if you don't want to. Most of the time, it is just me sharing my screen with everybody. So if you can join me for that 7 o'clock tomorrow, that would be great. And there is a link for it. I think the link is on my Facebook page. But if you can't find it, just let me know and I'll plug you in. Okay. I think that's just about it, really. In a moment, I'm going to play you out with a wonderful video called Life After a Brain Tumor, which doesn't sound terribly happy, but I promise you this is a very life-affirming video by the people at Green Renaissance. I love Green Renaissance a lot. They make some wonderful videos. I personally support them and often use their videos in the shed or in Soul Space or whatever. Stories of people that just fill you with kind of joy and a big smile inside. And that's what this one is about to do, and it nicely sums up so much of what we've been thinking about. So I hope you enjoy that. Enjoy the rest of your week. Hey, let's make Lent a time to be even kinder to ourselves and kinder to other people. Stay human, and I will see you on Sunday when we will begin a new Lent series in the Holy Shed. Oh yes, something to look forward to. See you in a bit. Bye.
I think everybody's scared of dying. I don't think that facing death makes you less afraid of it. I think you still feel like, you know, it'll be very hard just to have the lights turned off. One doesn't feel a tumor. When they found mine, it was already 4.5 centimeter diameter. That tumor lived in my head for possibly 6 years before I knew it was there. I didn't think you'd survive a brain tumor. I thought that was it. The only familiarity I had with a brain tumor was my grandfather when I was a teenager, and he had died. I went into the hospital. It was a Monday night. I had an appointment with a surgeon, and legally they're obliged to tell you the risks. And he spent an hour with us. It was terrifying. What if I don't come out the same, you know? In the end, it took 13 hours for the surgery. I had to learn how to walk. It actually made all those things that I felt most important about me much, much more difficult. I love to make things with my hands. Creating something out of nothing. So for the longest time, I couldn't do it. This room in my home is my studio. I didn't even walk in here for months and months and months because it just made me feel so gutted that I couldn't actually make the very things that I love making the most. I make dolls. It's a really small thing to make a doll. You know, I didn't figure out how to stop the ice caps from melting or something. But I feel like I make love and beauty visible in the world. I think it's an awesome thing to be able to love if you put it out there, how it just exists in reality all around you. To be here, you're able to love, then that's it, that's all you have to do. I have this amazing community of family and friends who actually will support me every step of the way because they did. That love, that support, that caring, it was extraordinary. It healed me to be like just submerged in that, carried on it. It was like a wave. It wasn't easy, but no, I wouldn't change it. I would go, I'm so grateful to have had those tough lessons that brought me to this place. You get all of yourself. And you realize that even the not so nice parts or the bits that you don't like they're still worthy of being loved. And you're not the sum total of the worst things you've ever done. You know, you're the sum total of that love that you generated in the world and that came back because you gave it so freely.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching this week's film. We really appreciate all your wonderful comments. It really helps to motivate us wanting to make these films even better for you guys. If you would consider donating towards us and helping support us, just click on the link below.